there's a lot of people moving and a lot of development, so. Apartments, yeah.
Well, they're friendly, everybody I meet is friendly, so I like
Yeah.
that, that's nice. But that's people want to know.
Randy, how long have you been here?
Gosh, when did I move here? I moved here in, must be about 1978.
90.
So you're still an outsider.
All righty,
22
I am
plus.
going to call
40 plus.
the plan commission meeting to order for Monday, June 7th. Roll call, please.
Trustee Calhoun,
Here.
Commissioner Dupuis,
Here.
Commissioner Case,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Trustee Gross,
Here.
President Lanfeld.
All right, thank you. Let's stand for a pledge of allegiance.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Howdy. Please.
Yeah, since I'm the only one here.
All right, we're at public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to address the plan commission on any issue. Please observe the time limit of 3 minutes while the plan commission encourages input from residents. It may not discuss or act on any issue that is not duly noticed on the agenda. Do you have anybody?
I do not have anyone signed up for public comment.
Go to general business, approval of the minutes from the May 3rd, 2021 plan commission meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? We have a motion and a second to approve the May 3rd, 2021 plan commission. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same. Number 2, discussion and possible action regarding the certified survey map combining parcel number 0707-031-4935-7 and parcel number 0707-031-4946-4, otherwise known as 2100 American Legion Drive. Let me just get a motion. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Go ahead with discussion, Bill.
All right, so this, I just want to point out where these parcels are as they may be hard to see on this map. So the smaller of the two is this triangle parcel here. And then the larger, which contains the building, is this parcel here. And so, as you'll see by looking at the map and looking in the packet for the next agenda item, the property owner is requesting a combination of the two parcels so that they may rezone the property as one piece. Currently, this property here is zoned as commercial, and this one here is Main Street.
All right, let's just do the first one first. Let's just do the survey map. I have a motion. And any questions on the survey map? Hearing none. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say so moved. All right, number 3, regarding an application to amend the zoning district of the property at 2100 American Legion Drive to plan development with the underlying base district of Main Street mixed use. We will be doing these as in letter A and then B. So do I have a motion to open up a public hearing?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing for the rezoning district property 2100 American Legion Drive.
Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. We are in public hearing is open. Is there anybody here to speak on at this public hearing? All right, I'm hearing none. So do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
A motion and second to close the public hearing, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. All right. Letter B, discussion and possible action regarding the application to amend the zoning district of property at 2100 American Legion Drive to plan development with the underlying base district of Main Street mixed use.
Make a motion to amend the zoning district at property 2100 American Legion Drive to plan development with the underlying base district of Main Street mixed use.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second, any discussion? Bill, go ahead.
I just want to make mention quickly here that, so the plan doesn't represent the concept plan. The notices were properly sent out to adjoining neighbors, property owners within 100 feet of the property. And that this was posted to the Middleton Times Tribune on the 20th and the 27th of May. And it is in compliance with our comprehensive code.
All right, very good. Any other questions? All right, do you want a roll call vote or just?
Yes, roll call would be great.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Brosius,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Case,
Yes.
Commissioner Duquette,
Yes.
Trustee Campbell,
Yes.
President Langill.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, number 4, regarding an application to amend the zoning district of property at 3025, 3027 Finnish Street to plan development with the underlying base district of duplex residential 6 to create a condominium agreement. This, do I have a motion to open up the public hearing?
So moved. I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to open up the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. All right, public hearing is now open. Do you have anybody for this one? All right. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. It's closed. We'll go to B, discussion and possible action regarding the application to amend the zoning district of the property at 3025, 3027 Finnish Street, plan development with the underlying base district of duplex residential 6 to create a condominium arrangement. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to amend the zoning district, property 3025, 3027 Finnish Street, plan development with underlying base district of duplex residential 6 to create a condominium arrangement.
I'll second that.
All right, do I have discussion? Bill, would you like to?
Sure, yeah, so this is also compliance with the concept plan. This is also posted to the Middleton Times Review on May 20th and 27th. We also had sent out letters to all the property owners within 100 feet of this property and have not received an objection or response. And then it is in conjunction with or in compliance with our comprehensive plan.
All right, any questions?
This is just what we discussed a time ago, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Right.
No, we did a conceptual plan. That, I know, these things come back very frequently. Yeah, it's-
Okay, good.
I swear to God, yeah.
I know.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second.
Quick question,
Yeah.
clarification, it said in the thing that they did this, as they want to do separate water and sewer laterals,
Correct.
but then on the letter of intent, it says that the utilities are split except for the sewer main. But does that mean that the water is not split currently?
So, when the laterals enter the property, I believe they are one single lateral. And then they are split and they go into each.
And they're metered separately.
And they are separate, correct, and we've confirmed that.
That was my only question.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote then, please.
Trustee Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner DeQuette,
Yes.
Commissioner Case,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Trustee Brocious,
Yes.
President Lingenfeld.
Yes.
Carried 6-0.
Okay. Number 5, discussion and possible action regarding the specific implementation plan for 3025, 3027 Finnis Street. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
All right, and I'm taking it you're making the motion in the positive.
Yes.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. We're at discussion. Bill?
Yeah, so this is the final stage here in the approval process for zoning for this property. It is includes a specific implementation plan, which you see the layout on the board here. Which includes splitting the lot in half, and then on the, what would be the western lot, they intend to add a deck, parking area, and a sidewalk to the property, to compensate for not having a garage on that side, and parking. Also included in the packet is the agreement, and restrictions created by and for the condominium arrangement. Once or if approved by the village board, at that time it would be filed with the register of deeds, and right with the property.
Okay, are there any questions, Judy?
There's a question, and off of Neeson Street, do they have to cut into like to do a garage there? They'll have to cut in the curb, correct, or is there not a curb there?
So they will not have a garage on Easton Street. That will be just an apartment.
Parking area? Okay, just a park, but on the parking area, but they'll still come in from the street there.
They'll have to come in from
Easton
Easton Street. And then I believe we have Serena Carlton representing the property owner on Zoom here, if there are any questions for her. I believe Kyle might be joining us by phone here, the property owner.
All right, does anybody have any questions? All right, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Trustee Brocious,
Yes.
Trustee Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner DeQuette,
Yes.
Commissioner Case,
Yes.
President Langfeld.
Yes. All right, carries. Number 6, discussion and possible action regarding the waiver request from section 83.104 regarding the construction schedule of creek crossing at St. Francis. Why don't we go with a presentation? I see Ron's here, and questions, and then that way we can make a motion that everybody's comfortable with.
Okay.
So,
Good evening.
yeah, I mean, go ahead if you want to start with it, Ron, and that, I just want to say you do have on your desk here an updated construction schedule that was sent over to me by Kathleen this minutes before the meeting. And so, that should be considered in your decision this evening. I think Ron's going to talk about that.
Right.
But essentially, due to some delay here in the permitting process and approval process, they're getting a late start in construction. And would require an extension or a waiver of the construction limit to be able to conclude construction this year.
Right, thanks, Bill. Yeah, I put together this construction schedule to illustrate where we hope to be at for building this project. And it shows getting permitting over the next 30 days yet. I had hoped to be starting right now in early June, but the wetland fill permitting has just taken longer than I expected. But it's in process. We hope to have that by the end of June, early July, and then be starting work in about a month. But the construction will take July, August, September, and October, and maybe even final cleanup into November. So the September 15th deadline is what we're requesting a waiver from. And by that date, we expect to have the bulk of the grading done, and we could have the lots seeded and mulched so that we would still get growth yet this fall on a lot of the site, which I think is really the goal. But we'd still be working on the streets, the right-of-way work well past that September date. So that's what we are requesting a waiver from to get this thing done this year.
Bill?
Yeah, and I want to add here, so in the packet and the recommendations that we provided, all except for number 1 is a reflection of what was granted to Scenic Valley. Similar in that situation, where construction was extended over past September 15th. Majority of the grading, the mass grading was the urgency, and extension beyond that September 30th date was given, especially for those areas that impacted where that led to infiltration of the detention pond and then the right of way work. In that situation, the MG&E and other utilities came in after this date. I discussed that with Brian, our village engineer, and Terry. We can't hold the developers to MG&E schedule or utility construction schedule, as they of course make their own schedule. So and that being said, a waiver per village ordinance does require a 3/4 affirmative vote of the whole planning commission.
Can I just, the only thing I differ is for number 12 on there. I thought with Scenic Valley, we shut everything down on October 31st. I thought we extended.
Well, my understanding.
Yeah, we extended the outside the right of way till September 30th, inside the right of way to October 31st.
Yeah, that's correct.
The request, the 12 is for after October 31st. Now, when you put in when you're saying streetlights, mailboxes, are you talking about still digging or just bolting them onto the cement that's already there for like the streetlights and install? Or are you talking about actually doing all of that?
Well, we expect to have the streets paved by the end of October. But would there still be some work in the terraces, for instance, with streetlights, mailboxes, that we'd still be a little beyond that date? Possible.
But would you be digging up ground to do that, or is it just bolting into things that are all, like the light poles, will the base be there and all you're doing is putting up the light and bolting it on?
That's an MG&E thing, so they might be augering a hole, but it'd be pretty minimal.
Yeah, a lot of that does or will depend on what the weather is like at that time and the frostbite.
Well, and what's the final restoration?
Restoration. Yeah, again, if there were some terraces that had to be matted yet, or it just seems like there's always cleanup once the streets paved and the sidewalks poured. There's just cleanup. So I didn't want to, that we'll do our best to hit that date, because that's a logical date, but just wanted to put that out there to see if that was acceptable.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I'm one for consistency. I think October 31st came up with the potential of obviously nothing growing. I think that's fair. Obviously, if the cement is poured for the light post, they're not disturbing ground. I don't have a problem. I don't know if that's actually part of the rule. I thought almost everything we're governing is the actual digging of ground. So they can continue to work as long as that stuff is there. That's my understanding. That's correct. They just can't disturb ground.
Okay. Anybody else?
I don't know, it's, I know every year can be different, but Honestly, November 15 now is, turns out I'm still cutting my lawn on November 15. It's really getting, it just, I think for some of these incidental finishing up things, I don't have a problem with November 15th, as long as the important construction is done, the ground construction is done. But for the last items, just, I'm okay with November 15th.
Bill?
So, I thought about this kind of over the weekend and they're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, really, there's really not much around them to be disturbed. And if I think they'll make a decision on the ground and, you know, they're not gonna be able to cure cement if we're below 40 degrees or 45 degrees.
They do it all year round now.
Oh, do they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no non-cement season anymore.
Oh, okay, but I'm really okay with that, but although, yeah, I do believe, like Todd said, having something consistent is also really important too, because we're already extending well beyond, but for good reason, but, I don't know, I could go either way.
Well, I think my feel is, while you may be cutting your grass November 15th, it's unlikely you're cutting it at the end of November. So if it's bare dirt, you're not gonna get grass grown by the time the snow flies and the freezing weather comes. And I think that was the incentive when the board did September 15th. They wanted to make sure there was a healthy growth of grass or cover on the dirt. So the erosion, and while that is a standalone, you have Brewery Thread very close to that. And if you don't have some type of cover on that ground, you're gonna have a lot of erosion going into the Brewery Creek and into the Black Earth Creek. So for me, I wanna make sure there's plenty of time to have a cover crop on the dirt. And that's why I'm kind of with the October 31st. I agree, Novembers are getting warmer. So I think if you planted November 1st by the 15th, I think the grass would be up most likely, and there would be some cover to it. I think it's a crapshoot if November 15th, it could, because we've had very warm Novembers. But then again, could be snowing within 3-4 days of that. So that's my only concern on that. And I'm not concerned with a small area for a light, but that last wording on there could be 2 acres, all I know. I mean, there's no standard that you put in there. You know, for me, if it was, you know, a 10 by 10 area, I wouldn't have a problem. But if it's 2 acres that's not covered and we have to deal with all the erosion in the spring, then I would have concerns with that. So I'm trying to balance what that, if there's some type of language we could put in there. I don't have a problem if you go to a spot and it's a small spot and needs covering, but I don't want this to be the okay to wait until November 5th to do that whole lot 56 or all the outlots. So that's why I'm leaning more towards, and that's what we did with Scenic Valley with those same ideas, is that, you know, October 1st, I think with the way weather has been, is still reasonable to get ground cover down.
So can we put something that says have the ground cover completed by October 31st?
Well, I think that's what we're talking about.
Oh, no, I look right.
For Scenic Valley, the item number 6, or actually item number 5 of 6, is restoration of all site work that does not drain into the infiltration pond areas will be completed, including seeding and mulch by September 30th. Number 6 is all sections within the right of way for stormwater sections must be completed and restored by October 31st. So we can put that wording in, and I don't know if that would eliminate a post hole. But it would, because you're not in the stormwater right away at that point.
One suggestion I would have is if there happens to be something to finish beyond October 31st, where we disturb the ground, how about if we mat it when we're done? Because that's instant cover. And again, we're shooting for that end of October, but I just know how things can go.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm. But then if there is some disturbed ground beyond that, we mat it.
And Ron, you're saying seed and mat it, so you'd basically dormant seed it, which is acceptable to the county and the DNR on most cases.
Yes, that's correct, Jeff. Mhm.
And when, next time they come, they move it December 1st.
Well, no,
I mean, that's,
I mean, we, to be honest with you, if we're going to waive these, this would be our second development, then we should really think about just changing the ordinance. If people aren't comfortable with maintaining a September 15th and we keep waiving it to October 31st, why do we have that and force people to come here again? This is the thing that keeps going through my head, but this is beside tonight. But you're right. I mean, because we don't set this and talk about it and get a firm thing where people will come through, you're right, everything's going to be constantly adjusted.
Yeah, in a perfect world, they would have started already in like June or May or June. It's just that they got brought up. And we wouldn't have this conversation if they started on one or two.
Well, I'm not sure we'd be done on time even.
Yeah,
now.
everybody's gonna go for October 31st, because that gives you 6 more weeks.
Mhm.
So, any business, I think, would want to do that.
Mhm.
That's why we gotta look at our ordinance and decide what is reasonable and that we can accept without them coming here for a waiver. All right, so, any other questions on this? So we will, I'm hearing two things, so I'm seeing what, a motion. Oh, Bill?
Just one quick observation, and maybe suggestion is, I've heard a lot about, being weather dependent, being how far are they? A waiver can be requested at any time, so that being said, if the planning commission does, I recommend the bill work through to October 31st date, depending on where they are in September, potentially ask for a waiver extension at that time.
I guess I'm probably a little bit more comfortable with that we give them the same thing we did at Scenic Valley, and we seriously look at changing our ordinance to meet that standard, and then we get it a line.
And I really like the verbiage that Todd read on Sunset Ridge. That's good.
Scenic Valley.
Or Scenic Valley.
Yeah.
That's the same language. So.
All right, well, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we extend the timeline for Scenic, this is for Scenic Valley. No, this is for, right, up to October 31st.
Can you, how about if we just make it similar to, or the exact as Scenic Valley?
Okay,
Then we don't have to redo all the language, and it's already written.
sure.
Yeah, so it will be just, as recommended without appointment with the law either. So they're proposing a July 6th conference, post-construction conference, which would mean that a construction will start after that. But every some items 2 through 7 would be the same as Scenic Valley. So those would be the ones that you would be.
Yes, that's my motion.
Okay, there you go. All right, do I have a second?
that one I will second.
All right, does everybody understand what the motion is?
I
They're
do
basically
understand.
going 2 through 12 using the Scenic Valley standard.
No, 2 to the 2 to 7.
2 through 7.
On this recommendation up here, which is different than the construction.
As long as I think there's some flexibility as we get later in the schedule here that the
Bill, would
circumstances.
would you be able to read that?
Yeah,
Just so people
I'll read it.
online can see it.
I'll read it, so the first, so based off the recommendation of staff, which is mirrors the scenic valley approval. The first condition would be to extend only to September 30th for all mass grading areas outside of the right of way. The second would be before September 30th, that all disturbed areas be temporarily seeded with rye or similar cover. Before September 30th or on that date, an inspection will be done to ensure that all erosion control best measurement practices are installed and in good condition as per the erosion control plan. And an inspection must be signed off on by town and country engineering and village staff. Number 4 would be whenever the site is not snow covered, there'll be a weekly inspection done by the developer of the erosion control best management practices, and a copy of that report submitted to the village again each week. And number 5 would be the restoration of all site work that does not drain into infiltration and retention areas will be completed, including seed and mulch by September 30th, 2020. It's 2020. 2021, excuse me. And then all sections within the right of way stormwater sections must be completed and restored by October 1st.
All right. So that is the motion. We're at discussion. Ron, is that gonna work?
We will make that work, you bet.
Very good. Any other discussion? Randy, did you say you wanted to?
Only if, but I presume that that'll be the case based on what Bill said, and that is that if the circumstances are such as the conditions develop, in September or October, that there could be a request for some adjustment, a reasonable adjustment, that would be beyond October 31, if it is prudent to do that.
Sure. I think that's always open. All right, I have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Dupuy,
Yes.
Commissioner Case,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Trustee Brochus,
Yes.
Trustee Kettleboard,
Yes.
President Langfeld.
Yes. Motion carried.
Thank you for the consideration. And
Thank you.
the board meets on this.
Monday, the
28, right? Yeah, 28.
Oh, way later month.
Yeah, because the 14th is our staff. The 28th, yeah.
Okay, we'll see you then.
Okay, sounds good, Ron, thanks. Okay, we are now at continuing our discussion on land use trends and needs in the village of Cross Plains. If you go, we are at page 83, industrial land uses. I'm hoping we can get it all done tonight. We don't have too much. So we'll start with industrial land use. Any discussion, questions, or changes you would make to that section?
I want to quickly say that we do have Mike Slavny on Zoom with us.
Great.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Mike. We're
I
on.
think it is important to recognize we have 3 industrial districts. So the business park district is almost an office park district. It's very light industrial. It does allow indoor storage and warehousing, but nothing really is occurring as an activity out of doors. No storage, no uses out of doors. And then skipping the light industrial, we have a general industrial district which allows things like heavy industrial land uses like a foundry as a conditional use. And it allows quite a number of outdoor oriented activities, including a freight terminal where semis are arriving and departing and dropping off their loads. And, you know, another truck picks up the trailer. We also allow outdoor storage in that district, communication towers. So it's called general industrial, but since we don't have a heavy industrial district, it's possible to get heavy industrial uses approved. And then we have a kind of an all-purpose light industrial district that allows both indoor and outdoor activity, including outdoor storage and wholesaling as a conditional use, personal storage facilities like mini warehouses, a distribution center, and a distribution center is like a freight terminal, but it's all for one company, like Target or Walmart or Amazon, which is easier for it's easier to coordinate arrivals and departures when it's all for one company. And then we allow also for a mineral extraction district, which is for quarrying or sand pits. And it's its own zoning district. These tend to be spot zones anyway. And we wouldn't want something that was approved with general industrial zoning necessarily being used for extraction. So the extraction district is intended for very limited use. So I hope that introduction was helpful to you, because these districts do differ significantly from one another. And I think that helps explain where the P's and C's are in the chart.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's do the first one, industrial land uses. Anybody see any need to change any of those?
Hey,
Bill?
hey, Mike, I'm not really clear, and I know you explained it, but I'm still fuzzy. For light industrial, we have a by right for mineral extraction. I mean, to me, a light industrial would be like most of the businesses on Bourbon.
Yeah, that's a typo, and we definitely want to get rid of that P. Thank you for catching that.
Good.
It was a test, good job.
I'm looking at that, I'm like, this is not right.
All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, anything else?
That's become Cs all across the board there, rather than the Ps, is that what?
No, just
under mineral.
mineral extraction becomes a C.
Becomes a blank.
A blank, yeah, a blank.
Yeah.
And just to cover, the indoor food production is not like slaughterhouse, right? That's for, if I recall correctly, plants and aquaponics or things like that.
Well, it
That's
could be.
correct. Good question. That is correct. So something like a slaughterhouse would be a heavy industrial land use up there in line 2 at the very top.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm just confused because why does the light industrial has a series of permitted uses, whereas the heavy industrial is conditional? Why aren't, am I just not reading this correctly?
No, it's because of what they cover that he just kind of went over. Light industrial is kind of the businesses that are on Bourbon. Heavy industrial would be, you know, your
UPI, your quarry.
yeah.
Heavy industrial land uses would have noise and odor that's typically associated with them. And you know, there are not many of those left anymore, but there are a few, and so we might want to make it a lot harder to get a heavy industrial use allowed.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, let's go to storage uses. Anybody have any changes in that? Okay, transportation land uses.
So when the transit center. Oh, I'm sorry, okay,
So this is looking very far ahead, and it's not very applicable to Cross Plains this year. But for example, if the bus system got extended, maybe commuter bus would be the most likely thing. A transit center would be something like a park and ride.
okay. What about if for some reason they extended the rail through Middleton and across Plains for passenger, would that also be?
Yes.
Okay,
We definitely want some say on that.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Would it be advantageous for number 5, that heliport, to put it as conditional use in real holdings?
I think that's a good suggestion.
I mean, I'm knowing more and more people are buying helicopters. I don't know why, but they are. I got 2 friends that just bought them. And they all live up in this, they have their own airports now down in Hollandale area. So it might be advantageous.
So you want to put it in rural holdings at C?
Let's see.
All right.
As long as we have a seat, because we have some rural holdings that are right in the middle of residential.
Right.
Right,
We need control over it. but I think
Leftover parcels, yeah.
So the Bitcoin miners are making money.
Yeah, is everybody comfortable with that?
yeah.
All right. We'll do that. All right, telecommunications land use, communication tower.
Right, so this would be for commercial purposes, not ham radio or, putting a satellite dish on your house. These would be commercial communication towers. And these are the districts where they're typically allowed in as a conditional use in rural holding. And then again, in the extraction district, often for closed quarries. The conservation district, where typically we don't have any development whatsoever. And these things actually have a pretty light footprint once they're erected. And then also in the general industrial district as a conditional use, typically they'd be denied in general industrial because there's not a lot of tax base associated with these, virtually no jobs. And, the rural holding area would generally be the district of choice for these.
The fire station.
I was gonna
get it.
say, right, because wouldn't the fire station be in the light industrial zone?
It's community.
And there's a tower coming right off the fire station.
Well, the fire station is.
But we approved it.
I know, but technically,
But there's not even a condition here for that.
yeah.
So I think the fire station and EMS would be, and police department conceivably would be exempt. Those towers would be accessory uses to the main use as a fire station. So these would be towers as the main use on the property.
Well, but they're also used for commercial.
Yeah,
because-
but he said that's accessory. to it.
Oh.
The tower's already there for the use of the fire department, so they're just renting out, yeah.
And it's not as pretty.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the other one's on the tower, the water tower, and that's.
Oh, that's one, yeah.
Conservation, yeah.
And again, those are just antenna, those are not towers. So this code
Oh, okay.
distinguishes between the smaller antennas and the, enormous towers.
So the towers would be like the ones on the west side.
Correct,
that go up 3,000, 4,000 feet.
right.
Okay,
So we don't even have it.
We don't want any of those.
Right, right.
all right.
None
Our
of them.
code, our code has to have at least a theoretical location for those.
Right.
All
I
right,
have a quick question here, Mike, do you know if that covers the 5G antennas or towers or what they're calling them? Now, there's a big debate amongst communities and. 5G.
Yeah, I think that again, we would be distinguishing between the towers and the antenna. So that it would cover the towers associated with 5G if that was the main use on the property, but if the antenna were attached to an existing structure, it would be an accessory structure on the property.
Okay.
all right, extraction and disposal. Land.
Yes. So extraction would be typically either a sand pit or a quarry allowed in rural holding or the extraction zoning district. And a little bit different than composting, which often, you want to make a little bit more accessible to the public. So we've added the general industrial district rather than the extraction district. Recycling and waste disposal, pretty much the same thing, except for the most part, not organic matter. Salvage yard and junkyard probably doesn't belong out in the rural holding district anymore. And again, identified for the general industry, or pardon me, the general industrial district. Sand and mineral processing, often, located at the source, but sometimes located in general industrial districts as well. And again, everything here is conditional.
Okay, let's go to energy production land use. These are large scale ones. There's smaller ones later on.
Right, the state requires these to be permitted in every district but we can have it as a conditional use.
Okay.
And frankly, they tend to be in the rural holding district or the conservation district.
All right.
It's too expensive to buy the real estate under the collapse zone for those.
All right, we'll go to accessory land uses.
Okay, so some of these are associated with state law. Most of them aren't. So the first is a home occupation, which again can be a business inside a home. It's permitted by right as long as there are no visible evidence of the home occupation. So this, and there are going to be more of these in the future, with COVID showing how easy it is to work from home. In-home daycare, that is one of the state requirements. The state requires that we allow these in residential zoning districts as well as commercial zoning districts by right. So this is limited to less than 8 children. An in-family suite. So this is when you have like a granny suite attached to the house, and there's a bedroom, a bathroom, and even a little kitchenette. These are not very common, but like when I bought my house, it came with one of those down in the basement. And this is a way to allow a quasi-separate dwelling unit within the same building as a single family house, but not let it evolve into a duplex situation. So these are, typically for relatives. And after granny leaves the premises, maybe your teenager or adult child takes it over. So again, we're trying to draw the line between what is something for a family member versus something that becomes a duplex.
Does that have its own entrance then? Is that required or not?
Yes, it can have its own entrance, but
Okay.
it has to be used by a family member. And then the next stage is the accessory dwelling unit, which does not have to be used by a family member. It can be rented. And we talked about these when we developed the code and how people might want to put one of these over a garage, maybe for a family member, maybe just as a rental unit. And they're limited in size. And a family member under the village code has to reside on the property. So we don't have two rental units on the same property. And the village was open-minded about these, but not enthusiastic. So we identified these as conditional uses, and we kept them out of the small lot single family district. So Bill, if you maybe adjust the view here, it'll help me remember where we drew the line. We allowed them in the 4 home per acre, 9,000 square foot lot district potentially as a conditional use. But if the lots got smaller than that, they are not allowed. And what's been interesting to me is 10 years ago, these were seen as a very viable housing solution. And then the cost got too high for single family homeowners to want to bother adding them to their property. That the trade-off between the time you got your money out, maybe you were likely to be gone from that property at this time. I've heard recently that the economics of renting have gotten so severe that now these are making a comeback. And, we tend to see them in the Chicago and Minneapolis suburbs before they make their way to Wisconsin. But they are making a bit of a comeback. And what it is the cost has gone up of building them, but the rents have really gone up. And these now represent a form of more affordable housing that maybe, all that's attainable, and as an extra source of income for the single family property owners. From my research, what makes a difference as to whether or not these remain in control is the requirement for the property owner to reside on the property. Now the property owners might be empty nesters, and they might actually be the ones living in the accessory dwelling units, and they're renting to a family who can use the single family house. So it's a great way to provide extra income to the property owner and provide more affordable housing that would be, available if you were renting a single family house, or if you were renting a 1-bedroom apartment in a new building. So we may see these more popular again. They're not even popular right now in Madison, but I've heard that as rents continue to go up, they're likely to get more used. I can't recall us ever getting an application for one of these since the code was adopted.
We've had inquiries about this, but we haven't had one come through.
Let's move on.
Okay. So a farm residence is just a way to get a house as the legal right when it's zoned in the rural holding district. So the rural holding district in the case of Cross Plains for big pieces of property is typically going to be used when property is annexed, but it isn't quite sure what it wants to be. So we bring it in as rural holding where hardly anything can happen, but we want to make sure that the farmhouse can be resided in legally. So that's the reason for the farm residence being permitted by right. Migrant employee housing, again, we've got to provide a zoning district for this. It is a form of land use that's common in some Wisconsin communities, typically not in the driftless area. Permitting it and limiting it as a conditional use in the rural holding district is the way to keep it under the tightest control. And then we have residential accessory structures, which range from a gazebo down to like a little library or a bird bath. And we talked about whether we wanted to make them any of them a conditional use. And instead we made them all permitted and just kept what some communities might permit out of the list of permitted residential accessory structures. Bill, I'm not aware of this ever being a problem in the village.
It has not actually, we've added to it, one of the large items that we added to the residential accessory structure, the small solar. Rooftop solar.
And then we have non-residential accessory structures, and they tend to be an equipment shed. That would be the most common way that these things occur. Often something like for lawn care or snow care equipment, rather than anything else. So they're permitted by right.
Yeah, so I got just a concern about that, because I know like within our neighborhood, originally when we bought the property, there was a covenants that we couldn't have a shed on our property. So, this counteracts that.
Right. So the zoning ordinance is written for the entire village, and our rules the village enforces. Covenants are written for a specific subdivision, and often they go away over times. Usually there's a 20 to 25 year period, and then after that, the homeowners association can decide whether or not to extend them every 10 to 15 years. So often the zoning code and the covenants do not align in terms of the residential accessory structures. Usually covenants are more restrictive. So for example, it would be common for the zoning code to allow a clothesline, right? It's environmentally friendly, but it's very common for covenants to prohibit them because the developer doesn't want clothes outside when they're trying to sell the lot next door. So, that would be an example of how covenants are typically more restrictive. A lot of covenants don't allow fences when the subdivision is new.
Right, yeah.
But the village, typically allows residential fences. So it's the property owner's responsibility to comply with both the village requirements or prohibitions and comply with whatever's required or prohibited in the covenants. It's the village doesn't enforce private covenants.
Okay, that makes sense.
So just a quick note on that, also the restricted covenants that I've seen in Cross Plains has a 25-year life, and then they automatically renew for 5 years, unless the homeowners association decides to go.
Right. Another
time there isn't a neighborhood association.
Yeah,
Somebody moves out of the lot, it's done with.
Yeah.
Another common difference is we allow the parking of recreational vehicles on site in particular areas, and often that's completely prohibited by covenants. So again, the village is a little bit more, we aren't the ones selling lots, so we tend to be a little bit more open-minded than covenants.
A question about the non-residential accessory structures, would that prevent the village from like putting a shed to store equipment on one of our conservation lands, for instance? Like if we just.
Yes, it would. And so if that's something you see as desirable, we should add that first column. Good catch.
Or at least as a conditional use. I'm just thinking, you know, if we wanted to have a shed up on Hickory Hill or something, because it's a pain to haul equipment up there, like, we want to have that as an option.
I don't have a problem with that.
Or put a pavilion over in Dana Park.
That's a park. That's a different thing.
Park is
That's a conservancy.
Oh,
Yeah, it's called Dana, but it's a conservancy.
I think we could put
Let's see.
at least a C. All right.
I
that's
just
all.
have a follow-up question on this. For example, the subdivision we've just approved, you know, both west of the village and out here by St. Francis Crossing, they contain deed restrictions that are going to prohibit several of these uses that are allowed here. They're going to be prohibited now. You're suggesting that those go away at some point, but is that clear when that actually happens? And this looks like a potential conflict for me that is going to come up. For example, in the subdivision that I live in, there's been a point of maintaining 3 active residents of the subdivision who are on this design review committee. Those people have not left. They live in the subdivision. I think those people think that they may still have some rights under the covenants that apply to that subdivision. But maybe that's not so. I don't, it seems like there's a potential conflict here in terms of whether the covenants apply or whether the ordinance applies.
Yeah, so the general rule is they both apply. So one thing that village staff does when we get a plat that has covenants is we review the covenants to make sure that the covenants do not allow something the village ordinance prohibits. Or, you know, so it might be the village does not allow a fence in the front yard taller than 4 feet. If the covenants would, in draft form, say they could be 5 feet tall, we would make them modify that. We don't want the covenants to allow things that are prohibited by the village code. A second thing we do is we are now making the developers put a warning inside the covenant documents that say that zoning regulations also apply, and property owners considering putting in a structure need to also review the zoning regulations for their property. So we're trying to give people a heads up. You know, I think unfortunately the most common problem is people act without reviewing the zoning and without reviewing the deed restrictions. And then the village and the property owners association both have some enforcement to do. But to the extent we can give people a heads up in the covenants that zoning rules often also apply, and that we catch and get rid of any conflicts where the covenants are more permissive than the zoning code. We catch those now when we review the covenants. And I think that's been in place for the last 15 years.
I just want to make a couple, actually, we've gone the opposite. If you remember on solar panels on the roof, most of the covenants in the past have restricted that. We've removed that restriction from the recent ones because we want that to be allowed. Okay, but there's a difference between a covenant and a deed restriction. A deed restriction is actually written within your deed, and you don't find that in your deed. All right, the covenants are the rules governing that development, generally for 20 to 25 years. And then eventually they expire, and then it jumps to zoning and ordinance. Just because we allow a shed to be put on someone's yard, there are still rules governing by an ordinance on the size and where it can be placed. So we gotta, while the zoning allows something like a fence, it's the ordinances that define what the size is and stuff like that.
So I can add some examples. So like we've had a lot of these recently where we get a fence permit or a building permit in subdivision that maybe is 20 to 25 years old and people don't know who the design review committee is anymore. As part of the permit review process, I take a look at the restrictive covenants. And generally within the restrictive covenants, it will state something like they need written permission from the design review committee. And so that would be a condition of what I've been using as a condition to approval of that permit, is that at least they've gone through review of it, and if they don't have a copy of this, we provide one for them.
And you might provide that even after 20, 25 years, you might do that.
Yeah, and that assumes that they go through the right process, so I can't speak to those that don't come full permit.
No, but if you read the covenant that it's 20 years and it's now been 30 years of that neighborhood, you don't force them to get that. Because it's no longer applicable.
Correct.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you, yeah. It's
No, I
only,
understand that.
okay,
And there is no limitation on the, at least on the older restrictions that I've seen, there's not a length of time. There is designated individuals and a method for maintaining active individuals, but there's not something that ends in time.
I would question that.
Well,
I don't think they can go forever.
Well, a lot of the recent ones dating back to even Glacial Valley that I've read through have 25-year limits automatically renewed. So at the end of that term, they automatically renew unless the homeowners association decides to dissolve it. So it doesn't expire automatically.
There were quite a few plats in the 50s and 60s, and even into the 70s, where there was no sunset clause on the restrictive covenants. And, there are often lawsuits about whether the homeowners association is active and the covenants apply, or, is defunct and the covenants no longer apply. And the village doesn't want to get into that. We want to stay out of those arguments.
All right, let's move on.
All righty, so recreational facility, swing set, and other minor recreational facilities, a basketball hoop, those kind of things, trampoline in the yard, and then minor landscape features, bird baths, a bench or a love seat, a fountain, a small fountain. So those are defined in the code and permitted by right for both of those categories. Residential stables, just what it sounds like. This would be a stable for horses associated with a home, again, only in the rural holding district, which if it's a new lot requires 35 acres. Typically it's the remnant farmhouse, and maybe they have a horse that they want to keep. Residential chicken coops, permitted again in the larger single family districts, not permitted in the duplex or the multifamily districts.
Hey, Mike, just a quick question on that. So we do the permitting through a license process, and it wouldn't go necessarily through the conditional use process.
So So Bill, we may want to take this line and instead of having Ps and Cs, we might just want to indicate there's a licensing process now.
Okay. Then I don't know if you have like beekeeping in here anywhere, but that would be.
Yeah, so beekeeping is right after that. And if you've got rules for that, we'd want to do the same thing. Okay, then on-site parking is, parking a vehicle on the property. So, allowed by right everywhere. Company cafeteria, not very common anymore. There's one at Epic. But that is what it says. It's preparing food and serving it inside a business location to employees. We have incidental outdoor display. So that would be like on the property we reviewed tonight. They may have incidental outdoor display of craft items that they've identified locations for, like on the back deck, for example. So if somebody was if they were hosting a reception there, and let's say the bride was a jeweler, they'd be allowed to have a jewelry display outdoors. And we require that those display areas be specified on the site plan so that they in fact are incidental and it doesn't look like Maxwell Street days. And the same goes with incidental indoor sales. Let's say the jeweler has a studio and it's basically an artisan studio, but we would allow a small percentage of the floor area to be devoted to like a showroom or a sales area for display of the items made on site. This also occurs for industrial uses. Often they'll have a display area of the products that they're selling. Those items may not actually be for sale. They might be just for display, but we would allow them to be sold on the property. And then the opposite of that, incidental light industrial, would be typically where you have a commercial use, but they're doing some light fabrication as a part of that commercial use. So it might be someone who's selling ironware, but they've got a small blacksmith operation in the back of the building. Or more commonly, it's someone who's selling ceramics, but they have a kiln set up in the back area. So again, very, very common kind of activities. And we've just decided to make them permitted in the commercial and industrial districts. And then we've got these minor communication related structures. So satellite dish, a personal antenna and tower. So that would be a ham operation, which the federal law makes us allow everywhere. And then communication antenna, like we were talking about for cell service. These are the 3 to 5 foot tall antenna, not the tower itself. So again, these are all permitted by right. And we did the change for the small wind and solar systems recently, where we're allowing those everywhere now. And in fact, Bill, I think we've made a lot of the solar things permitted in certain locations and conditional in other. So we may want to revise that line just to keep up with the other code amendments we made. All right.
Very good.
So these are temporary uses. And again, these tend to be accessory, but they are not full-time operations. And there are limits described in the zoning code. So farm product sales, if you're setting up in a permanent location, and you aren't operating it year-round, permitted by right in the rural area. Temporary outdoor sales, that would be event oriented in the commercial district as well as the rural district. Temporary outdoor assembly, which would be, an event outdoors. Not assembly wouldn't indicate it's a commercial purpose. It would be a ceremony typically of one kind or another. And those could occur in residential areas like a wedding in the backyard. It could occur at Sander Park in the new ceremonial area. It could be the president visiting a business. So that's what the outdoor assembly is all about. And these are all permitted by right because in fact they are temporary and they're not being run for a commercial purpose.
I have conservation, the conservation district.
Yeah, we might, yeah, I think we should.
Good idea.
So like the farmer's market that's up on the southwest corner of the signal there, that's in.
That would be temporary outdoor sales.
Not the farm product sales.
So Mike, what would you do, the farm product sale?
So that would typically be the wagon from a farm setting up.
So Kelcher implements, I'm not sure what zone they're actually in. When they do their open house, they obviously have tractors parked out front and then their lawn and everything like that. That's a temporary display.
Yeah, so farm products here would mean eggs or pumpkins, not machinery.
And there's a separate one for farmer's market. So that, the very last one.
Oh.
So that,
So these would tend to be individual vendors for the, the temporary farm products. So at their farm. So a little bit different than the farmer's market itself. And then the farm equipment display, that's a principal land use. And if we back up a few pages, you could see it as outdoor sales. Let's go back to the commercial land uses. There we go. So yeah, outdoor display. There you go. All righty. So temporary shelter structure. I've forgotten what that is. We'd have to go back to the definition in the code. I apologize. I looked these over, but I missed that one.
It's typically supported by poles, have a fabric, plastic, fiberglass.
Oh, yeah.
the tent.
So this would be a temporary tent, typically, associated with a backyard wedding, for example, or a ceremony in the park. So again, these are the structures themselves.
Yeah, we should add conservancy to that.
You want, is it going to be permanent or conditional? Because they have to rent the conservancy or the park to put the tent up.
Right, but part of the process of getting a permit is proving all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what are you gonna use, what are you gonna serve, and those restrictions, so I keep it in a permitting. It'll allow it, but it falls under the permit. Just like when trout days come in, they put in, we'd like a band, we wanna put a stage, I'm trying to keep it simple for people and for us.
Yep, I think that's fine. P's for both the assembly and the shelter structure. Temporary storage containers. So these are storage containers, but they could also be the U-Pod that you get from U-Haul that usually sits in your driveway. And you fill it up and you give U-Haul a call when you've got it filled up, and they take it away and, move it with their trucks to the next location. So these could also, these are broader than just storage containers themselves. They're also a dumpster in your driveway that your contractor is using. So again, permitted by right. Temporary on-site construction storage. This is where the new material is permitted, not the waste material. So again, of course, that's permitted by right. And the contractor's project office, again, not very common for a house, but really common for a big apartment building or a commercial facility. I do a lot of work around Geneva Lake, and some of the houses there are big enough that they get an on-site contractor's project office. But not that typical nowadays for residential purposes. Although with the price of lumber, maybe we'll see more of these. And again, temporary on-site real estate office. This would be where the developer has put up several model homes, and they've set up an office often in one of those model homes. And you can, just go there without an appointment and tour the models, and they'll take you around and look at the empty lots. So again, permitted by right. Temporary relocatable building would be the same thing, but it used for something not necessarily associated with construction. So the most common use of these is when a school needs to expand, and they've gotten a whole slug of kids all at once. Maybe there's been a change in attendance areas, and they need to provide for temporary classrooms. That would be the most typical use of those. A garage or estate sale, we know what those are, permitted by right. And then we've got farmers markets allowed throughout the commercial districts, also in the light industrial district, and also in the rural holding district. And because those typically involve multiple vendors, and can be complicated because they've got vehicles that the vendors are using and vehicles for the customers. It can kind of be a cluster unless you get a real site plan. So we've chosen to regulate those as conditional uses.
All right, very good. Bill, if you could, for the next meeting, give us the master with all the changes in it. We'll take one more look at it and move it on to the board. That would be great. Appreciate all the help on this, Mike.
It's a pleasure. We got some good ideas tonight. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Mike, we'll coordinate on that list, just to make sure that we don't miss anything.
Will do.
All right, Mike, one last thing. Can you send me that extraterritorial information?
Yes, I've had trouble finding it, and I found it late this afternoon, so I'll get it over to you, Jay.
All right, thank you very much. All right, let's go to number 8. We have scheduling of the July Plan Commission meeting. Currently, it's July 5th, which is the day after 4th of July. So we were wondering if that's not a good day to do it, if we should move it.
That would be a vacation for, a holiday.
Oh, okay, well,
See, that's funny, because we just went through this day, my vacation comes on June 2nd, or July 2nd, instead of the 5th, but we thought it was gonna be 5th.
I need that.
Federal holiday.
Get both days.
all right, let's stay focused here. So what day, do we want to move it a week?
Yeah, let's go to 12.
12?
What we've done in the past is slide it to the Tuesday the first week, but
Yeah, but I'm wondering if people are off, if they go up, if they're gonna be gone, it's potentially that whole week. Well, let's just see how many people are gonna be gone that week.
I think for the 12th, I probably am not going to be here, actually. I may be gone.
12th, I won't.
Oh, okay.
I could make it the 6th, but you can make it the 6th.
I could move it back a day or two.
Well, how about moving it forward to this, can you do the 6th, Tuesday the 6th?
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about
Tuesday, the 6th of July.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
I thought you go.
I won't be here.
Can you zoom in or no?
I'm gonna be. I might be able to.
You would have been gone the 5th too then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
What about the 7th? Another
I'll
day?
be gone the whole week.
Oh,
I think.
What you guys.
I'm open, other than July 2nd, because I'll be up north. And I can't zoom in, because I have nothing.
Yeah, I'll be a couple months.
So can you make
State
it?
park.
I can make 6 or 7, 6th
Is
is
it
better.
I am making it done. But I can always go into town
Oh,
and
okay.
jump on my phone.
Or, so should we make it July 6th then? It seems
that's fine.
that works the best for everybody.
Tuesday, July 6th.
All righty. We have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
We have a second.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Thank you very much. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.